Speaking of which, if you did consider it chilly, I'll introduce myself. My name is Burr. And don't be intimidated, my tech guy Claude over here, he's from Missouri too, Independent.
Oh, we're from Lee Summit.
Yeah.
Are you? I've got relatives in Lee Summit.
Oh.
Don't float around.
Well, just don't go back and tell them where I am.
There's a picture in the Independence Post Office, very similar to you. Look.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
So we gotta have a video of my ugly face for some reason, so just don't mind him at all. I'll tell you about maple sugar, and I got a New Yorker here, so I better be careful because he knows as much about it as I do. Sugar and what it is, it goes on right here in this sugar house, but only in the spring. We're lucky if we get 4 or 5 weeks to do our sugaring. That'll come to us usually mid-March through mid-April. We've got to make the entire amount of syrup for the year right then and there. Sugaring always follows a long, hard winter. Oh, we're always so glad to say goodbye to winter and welcome sugaring, which is in the spring. This is spring.
Yeah, I can remember that.
Yeah, I bet you can. Yes, we still have snow when we sugar. In fact, we want to have snow. The best sugar season is going to come with a coolness to the atmosphere. Not cold, not warm, just cool. The snow will be melting as we sugar. Here are the maple trees we tap. There's wild sugar or hard rock maples. Nobody that I know has ever planted them for production because it's going to take 40 to 50 years of growing before a maple's big enough to use the first time. I'm not going to go plant a bunch of trees and wait around. We go to these trees which we either own or have permission to use, and we drill tap holes about 1 inch deep into the sapwood. In February, we have to drill a new hole in a different place every year. I don't think we're hurting them with that drilling. I'm sure there's maples that have been tapped 100 years in a row right on this farm. They're still okay. We do want to be careful not to over-tap the trees. This maple is over-tapped, and that's one of the neighbor's trees. Tweren't my fault. He was in Florida when we tapped his tree. Here's one's more conservatively tapped. It's a better idea to take it easy on them, I'm sure. The weather has to be just right for sap to run. We need freezing every night, but not too cold. We need thawing every day, but not too warm. And we need a west wind. Besides that, we're not fussy at all. And that wind direction is part of the equation for sure. A south wind and east wind, they're no good. They shut the trees right down, I believe, because that brings the wrong atmospheric pressure. And another thing weather-wise I can tell you is a good sticky snowstorm. We call it sugar snow. That'll give us the right atmosphere for a run of sap. I say sap runs, I don't really mean it. It's just a dripping. Drip, 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 drip. That's a good run. I've seen a 3-gallon bucket fill up before in 8 hours at that rate. Why, don't you know, things get pretty damned exciting. And you see, the sap looks just like water. Tastes a lot like water. It's just 2% sugar content. It's not sticky. It weighs 8 pounds per gallon. It's going to take 40 gallons of sap to boil down and make 1 gallon of pure maple syrup. My son Robbie's having a drink right out of the bucket. Oh yeah, I drink a lot of sap that way, but you know, really all it is a good way to quench my thirst in the spring. It don't do a darn thing for the hair. Yeah, it almost looks like maybe a sap drinker or two came right
It does work.
It does work. That's that New York sap. We have to put on the snowshoes. We'll be out in the woods all February preparing to sugar. And I'm telling you what a hard day's work that is. Here's a scene from yesteryear. Yeah, the sled's pulled by a horse through the woods. Looks like Ma's driving and Pa's out getting. Kind of a romance attached to sugar in that way. But you know, we've all had to modernize. We're bringing our sap in these days from roadside tanks with this rig. They're served by over 3,000 trees on this place, those tanks. And here's how it gets to the tanks. It's a plastic tubing strung tight from one tree to the other. Sap will just flow right along through the tubes. We should have it made with that tubing, but there's a problem. I'll show you right here. The darn squirrels chew into it. The deer have started chewing it. The moose will blunder through and knock it down. So we do have our share of maintenance with the modern sugaring. Sap trickles down the lines. We're even using vacuum these days. The vacuum will go right back up the lines to the trees. It sucks the sap out. We get more sap that way. We make it run when the weather's not perfect, and I'm convinced we're not hurting the trees a bit with vacuum. Takes a huge amount of fuel to boil sap. We're burning wood chips here. It's a flowable fuel right into the hopper of the wood chip gasifier. The flame will pull back through our evaporator by the draft. Sap enters first up here in this steam away unit where the steam rises from boiling below. The sap gets preheated and begins to sweeten up here. And then it goes down to the flue pan. It's a heat exchanger. It's just a raging boil. And sap sweetens to a 6% sugar content here, because you see the water's leaving as steam. And nature's sweetness goes right along ahead and gets finished in the front pan by traveling a long ways down and back through a 5-compartment maze. Sweetens up, you see, as it goes, just like my wife Betsy has over the last 35 years. Betsy writes the script for me. The syrup has got to be just the right thickness. One way we check it, see if it's ready, is to let it sheet or apron off a dipper. That is a good old-fashioned test. We do also need to use a hydrometer. Syrup must weigh exactly 11 pounds per gallon precisely. Anything less boiled will sour. Anything more boiled will crystallize. My son Tommy shows you the hydrometer. He also shows you, gosh darn it, he needs a new shirt. Syrup is an amber color. It is 67% sugar content. It goes through a filter press to get a mineral called sugar sand removed. Then it's crystal clear and ready to can. We may have to boil all night long to keep up with a big run of sap. Here's the neighbor's sugar house steaming up into a moonlit sky. He's been accused of making something besides me. There are 4 grades of syrup, and well, you can go taste them. You've tasted the end result, the sugar on snow, and I assume you love that.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I'm
And
glad.
the dill pickle.
And the dill pickle, the most important piece of it. But now that the sugar on snow is the end result, the sap water is the beginning of it, and in between is the maple syrup, which we have 4 grades of. The light-colored grades we make early in the season. They have delicate flavors. The dark grades we make late in the season. They have strong flavors. It's all up to the weather. We have no control over the grades. They're boiled the same. Here's the fake stuff you see back in Missouri in the supermarket. You know, they're going to use the word maple on this stuff, even when, by God, there's no maple in it. It's an artificial thing called maple flavoring. I don't even know what they make that stuff out of.
Chemicals.
Probably chemicals. Look for the words pure maple. Preferably look for the words pure Vermont maple, or better yet, pure Morse Farm Vermont maple.
Don't you sell it in a can, though?
The cans got taken off the market a couple of years ago. They were being farmed out to China, and you know, as things go, there was something bad found as a residue in there, and those cans got taken off the market. So we're pretty much well down to a plastic jug now as a container, but it's a good container. I got a quick story to tell you about Vermonters like my friend Gerald Pease. My father was in here a few years ago giving this talk to a group of Vermonters who are a little bit the silent sorts. They don't always loosen up with a lot of emotion, you know. My father got through the whole talk and put into it a lot of humor. And God, he didn't get a sign of a response. I was over by the door when they left. I heard a guy say to his wife, "Say, Maud, wasn't he funny?" Well, I'd say with such a shocking lack of emotions here in Vermont, it's hardly no wonder the darn state is underpopulated. My father shows you what things look like at the end of the season. Sugaring will begin with the deep snow, it'll end with the deep mud. God, it wouldn't have been so bad, but you see, Pa was standing on my shoulder. And the cars get stuck right on the public highways in mud season at the same time that we sugar. Sugar makers are farmers. You don't make a living on a 4 or 5 week season. Normally you're milking cows and cutting hay. Here's the color.
Oh, wow.
You know, the reason I show you this picture, though, really has nothing to do with colored leaves. I'd like to point out how rugged Vermonters are. Those two in the canoe of Vermonters, God, they'd gone out that day. They'd picked out the rock and they was towing it back. And just one more thing I'll let you folks know is we have to stretch up in this neck of the woods to make a living. I'm a sugar maker and a farmer. I'm also a bit of a writer. I write couple of stories each month I send out by email. It's called News from Vermont, but you can get it. Go to morsefarm.com, put in your email address. It won't cost you a penny, and by God, if you don't like me, you can delete me. I've written a book here, Golden Times, Tales Through the Sugar House Window. It's got some of the funny things that have happened in my lifetime around here right in it. It's your lucky day. We just happen to have a few for sale down here in the store. Thanks a lot, folks, for coming to see me.